Hey, Cross of Life, Pastor Caleb here with another Driving Theology video. I just read a paper on church membership by Pastor Alex Lindemann. He is a new pastor in our district of our church body, so he is in a church that's just outside of Richmond, Virginia. And his paper examined the history of church membership and then how church membership is practiced in our modern day. And I wanted to share with you just a couple things that I think he brought out really well, and that were things that sparked my imagination a little bit that I wanted to share with you, particularly for those of you who are regular attenders of Cross of Life, members of Cross of Life, because frankly, if you're a person who doesn't attend Cross of Life very often, you're probably not watching this video anyways. And so my message is not really directed at you, but it's more directed at those who do see Cross of Life as their church home, and what does that mean for us in our life together as a church. So one of the things that he noted was the difference in terminology that some churches use when they talk about what it means to be an active participant in a congregation. Our church uses the term member or membership, and he said that's kind of at least more recent history. That's kind of the way that most churches will use will describe their relationship with the people who attend their church. But more recently, there's been a shift to the term partner. And the reason for that is the recognition that being part of a church is not a one-time action, which membership implies you kind of get in and then you're in. But it is an ongoing action, and it is an ongoing action of which you are a primary actor. Membership implies that there is something that the organization provides to me and that I am receiving, and that is dependent on my membership, not on whether I am fulfilling any sort of responsibilities or duties or anything like that. That attitude is just not biblical. The biblical attitude of participation in a church is not about being once in and then that's it, but about actively participating in the community. And so there's some wisdom in talking about there being partnership when it comes to being a member. And I think it's good for all of us to evaluate, do we have a functionally consumer relationship with our church, where we kind of think, I'm in this church in order to get what I need, but as far as the life of this church or the other members of this church, partners of this church, that's not really my responsibility. That would be an anti-biblical way of thinking, of conceiving of your participation in a church. Another thing that he talked about was expectations. So how do you then mark who are the partners, so to speak, or members in your congregation from those who aren't? At least historically, from my understanding and what I've kind of been trained in and have practiced at Cross of Life, membership has basically been expressed by a regular enough attendance at church and the Lord's Supper so that we don't start asking questions as a leadership team as to where you are. That's pretty much where we've been. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality. That's what we've been doing. And I personally am not a huge fan of that. I think that it's just too arbitrary, first of all. If the metric is just you're not showing up enough, what is enough? Is enough 6 weeks? Is enough 6 months? Is enough 6 years? And then, it's all contingent on the relationships that a certain group of people, the leadership team of a congregation, have with a person, right? So a person might stay on our list longer because so-and-so who's on the team has conversations with them occasionally, even though they're not at church. And so we might want to cut them some slack. And again, I'm all for being gracious and patient with people, but it's pretty arbitrary, a pretty arbitrary way of doing it. And so what he suggests as a possible way of remedying this is to say, well, membership then is not once for all. It's a renewable thing. You have to renew your membership. Now, there are some inherent weaknesses with this because how do you sort of measure whether a person is going to be renewed in their membership or not? If they attended church, 36 times last year, and they say, well, the standard is 38 times a year. Can they not be a member or something like this? So you can obviously see there's inherent problems. My take on it is that it would probably be wise for just every member of our church to yearly commit to saying, I want you to, talking to me, want you to be my pastor for another year. Not because I'm so great, but because I am, in a sense, the centerpiece of communicating, distributing God's gifts that actually make us Christians. So again, this is not about me. It's about the fact that you as a congregation have called me to be the preacher of the word and the administrator of the sacraments of baptism and the Lord's Supper. Those are what makes us a church, more than any sort of governmental status or, church building or anything like that. So, could our people think about committing to saying, I want you to be my pastor? And inherent in that is then sort of the permission given to me as a pastor to follow up with you regularly and say, hey, you said you wanted me to be your pastor and you haven't been in church for 2 weeks. What gives? Can we have a conversation about that? And then we can solve the problem together rather than just purely solving by metrics, right? I think it strikes the balance of both the organic nature, the flexibility of human relationships, which are what the church is made of, while still being structured enough to give us a foundation that we can all look back to for our relationship together as a church. These are just musings. I'm not making any proclamations about what Cross of Life is going to do or not going to do. That's ultimately not my call. And all of this stuff, besides the fact that being in the scriptures and being at the Lord's Supper are necessary for being a practicing Christian, all of this stuff is just sort of people's opinions about how to, what's the best way to skin a cat, so to speak. So we can have a little bit of flexibility on these things and be generous with one another. But I think it's interesting to consider. And maybe if you have thoughts on this, I'd like to hear what you think. What do you think makes church membership? What do you perceive are the expectations of membership at your church? What do you think churches should do in order to help congregational members or partners realize the responsibilities that go along with being part of their congregation? I'd be interested in what you have to say. Why don't you put something in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.